Okay, let's wait a couple of minutes before, maybe not minutes, but sometime before it initializes. Because when we tested this, it initialized with a little delay. So let's wait a moment until it initializes in all channels. Okay. I think it should be enough. Okay, so let me open with a couple of words before we went over into the first Angular Space Meetup. We should be live on Twitch, LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. LinkedIn told me that it might be a little bit late, so maybe it's not live yet, but these 4 channels we are going to support for the Angular Space Meetup. And I'm going to just say a couple of words because Armen is going to be the host of this meetup, and I'm going to say a couple of words and just leave it up to Armen to run. So the idea of Angular Space Meetup is basically to create something that it's not a typical meetup like you have locally when you have a couple of people with presentations and then questions and answers between the presentations. We are going to do different formats. Like we will have the regular one, we'll have podcasts, we'll have interviews, and this here is going to be a mix of a couple of these. So let's quickly, maybe before we introduce our guest, let's maybe let Armen say a couple of words before we go live. Let's tell us, Armen, what we are going to talk about, who is going to be our guest, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, first of all, hello everyone. I hope this first stream is gonna be enjoyable for you. We have a great topic. We're going to talk about signals because, of course, we are, right? Specifically, we are going to talk about the future of signals, about everything exciting that the Angular team might still have in store for us, and of course, everything related to that. Today, my article came out about migrating to Angular Signal. So you have, if you have issues with that, you can check it out and maybe find some answers to your questions. Of course, we will also partially cover it today. So I thought, who better can speak about Angular Signals than Michael Smalls, our guest today? So we can bring him up now.
Yeah, do the honors, Armen. Bring him up.
Hey,
Hi,
everybody.
Michael.
Hey, Armen. Thanks
Hey.
for Armen and Daniel. Thanks for having me on.
So if you don't know, although it's very possible if you don't recognize Michael, he probably helped you out at some point because he is super active in the community. He loves helping Angular developers out and clearing up different issues that people might run into, especially when it comes to signals. Michael is a front-end lead at Relationship One and a contributor to ngrx-toolkit and also ngxtension. And if I remember correctly, your function, that utility that you contributed to ngxtension called allEventsSignal, right? We will
Yeah,
also talk about it in a moment. It started as a article, right? Community article on Angular Space.
yeah. I believe it was one of the first community contribution articles for Angular Space, if I recall correctly.
Nice.
We need another
Nice.
one. Like we need more of
I
your
know.
articles. I have been like trying to get one of you for a long time, but yeah, I hope it will come soon. Okay, guys, let me leave you and to do your job. I'm going to leave now and try to figure out why YouTube is not online. You don't worry about it. If it's not going to work, we can do this YouTube another time. So have fun and yeah, take it off, Armen. Thanks.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks, Dan.
okay, here we go. Oh,
I
cat.
she's a little territorial. This is her room, so
This is
we may
nice.
have a guest as we go
I love
on.
cats. I love cats. What's her name?
This is Candy, and
Okay.
also because her brother Benjels
Yeah.
can't go too long without me, he is also in the room.
Oh,
So
I see.
if I'm like they just jumped over my monitor or something.
Oh wow, that's great, man. I love cats. So yeah, Angular signals, right? So maybe I think we could start by doing a little recap. As far as I understand, you also prepared a lot of content to show us, right? And if I remember correctly, it was going on about what we have now with signals before jumping into the managing expectations section, right, for people.
Yeah, I thought I made two things. I made a little slideshow to briefly reference overview of stuff, and then in case we got into some more concrete, like, so what about this thing? I made a stack blitz. If anything, there's so much stuff in there. I imagine we won't hit everything. That'll be there for a good link for later to reference stuff and links to docs and articles and stuff like that. So should I share my screen then?
Yeah. Please go on.
All right, sharing that tab. There we go. Okay. I believe.
Hey, Rainer.
Oh, hey, Rainer. Mr. Henderson. Ole. Sup, David. Zephyrus. Is this showing up on the stream? My screen sharing this tab.
Oh, I'm not seeing it right now, but yeah, now it's here.
Okay. All right. So I'll maximize this. So at an overview level, if you want to know the state of any sort of Angular API at a higher level, the Angular Can I Use by Jérôme Grignot is awesome community tool. I'll open that here. Okay, I'm sharing by the tab. I'm going to low-key switch to sharing by this window here, just so it's easier for me to pop out some tabs.
Wait, we lost the screen.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to show a whole. There we go. Just because I realize I have so many links and stuff.
Yeah.
So if you look at Angular Can I Use at the state of some various Signal APIs, came out in developer preview or experimental in 16. Core stuff stabilized in 17, as well as you got like Signal inputs, queries, models, and whatnot, and then as well as some like interops, and then a lot of stuff stabilizing out in 19 and 20, and then you have some things like resources that are still in experimental and whatnot. So, and some upcoming things that we'll talk about that are not even like released even in experimental.
Angular Can I Use is a really great tool. So everyone watching, if you haven't checked it out, please, we will specifically also post a link to this. If you are unsure about your Angular upgrades, this is a great way to understand what might go wrong, what probably could be deprecated or even removed. And of course, if you want to try out the new toys like resources and signals and so on. By the way, this is finally where I see something that explains the difference between experimental and developer preview, because for me it was always something like, well, experimental is even more dangerous. That's it. This makes more sense.
Yeah, that's a good distinction to know, because my team has been using signals from the ground up starting at 17 when most things were still in like developer preview. And even through upgrading the versions, we got an app currently on 18 and then a bunch more apps on 19 at the moment. Using all this stuff from developer preview and on, we haven't had any issues. I can't guarantee that across the board, of course, but using Signal APIs and developer preview has worked great for us. We got stuff that started in 17 in prod, and we don't quite use experimental things. We're just keeping our eyes out on something like resource, but I've just been previewing to us like, hey, check out this this resource thing. Like, keep this in the back of your mind. This is going to be a real cool thing. Once we upgrade to a version that is at least like developer preview or stable or something for resources.
So you do use stuff that is developer preview, right?
I
recently discovered that I think it was in version 20 maybe even, or at least 19, where the new unsubscribe operator take until destroyed, right, from the RxJS interop package. It wasn't stable actually until quite recently, but we were using it extensively in our apps. So maybe developer preview is not that scary, but it still means that the API itself might change. So you might face code changes, like breaking changes that you would have to attend in your code.
Yeah. Fun fact, if I'm remembering it correctly, I believe when it stabilized in 19 or 20, I was looking at the docs and I was like, hey, Kitty Cats, don't have a little fight on camera. When it stabilized, I was looking at the docs and I was like, oh, it still has a developer preview banner, and I got to make a little PR and got to get that removed. So I was like, that was a cool little thing. But same thing, I was like, I didn't know all the interop was in preview at this point, but most of the interop is stable now as of 20, like you said. I love the interop, and I'll talk about that with the allEventsSignal, for example, with forms. That has been a really huge piece of my workflow in general, like the interop, or maybe some utilities that you may be using in like a library or something like that. So, and there are things coming to that, as I understand, that we'll also touch on.
I think at least 50% of Angular developers are using RxJS pretty extensively. So linking it up with Angular signals is always going to be an important topic, regardless of how RxJS will be in the future. Like, will it become optional, and how soon will that happen?
Yeah. And I was catching up with your article this morning, talking about like migrating like two signals. Does that mean migrating off RxJS? Like, no, RxJS is still powerful, and like they're still putting APIs out there for stuff like that. So yeah, sort of finding the balance and stuff like that. I like that in that article you dropped.
So what do we have here?
Yeah, so just very quickly going through like the beginning of stuff. You got writable signals with setter update, effect, computed, the interop, like to signal and to observable. And there's a few other things like you can do an observable output. So like you can just have some observable that automatically makes an output.
Yeah.
And then just very quickly, rest in peace, mutate. Didn't make it out of 16 for a great reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was the state of things out of the box. And
I was a bit mad about the mutate function, because I wrote a section, several paragraphs about it in my book, and it went through the review. I was already moved on next chapters, and then I saw in the 17 version release that they dropped it. I had to go back and kind of rewire all of the stuff. But yeah, I think it got removed for good reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can't imagine writing a whole piece on that. I don't write the most formal kind of content like you up front, so I haven't been bitten as much by that. But I appreciate, people like you and other creators, making content like that. Even though some of these things like early on, like something like mutate didn't make it, but again, overall for a good reason. And actually, Reiner, who's in the chat, made a little video when that happened, announcing like mutate's going away. Here's what you would do if you want to. You probably want to move on to signal update and whatnot, and like this is how you would like do it immutably. So it was a nice little resource to have. Moving on, then in like 17, you get like input instead of the decorator-based input. You have input.required, which actually decorator input also has input required. That came like right before that anyways. And then you have some input transformations. And they don't encourage too much transformations, but you can do stuff like built-in things like Boolean attribute. Like you can just do equals, like you can put like just false on something without having to do like this thing equals false and stuff like that. Or if you want to pass something in as a number, you can like have it look like a string for like the number attribute.
This is actually a very good like rundown of what you should use transformations for, because I've ran into the sort of questions previously, like developers would ask me, why would I need to declare a computed property? Like inputs, especially like signal inputs, are read-only. So if I need to do something with the value, I can just do it in the transform function, especially if I'm not touching anything that I've like injected for dependency injection and so on. But yeah, I think you are correct, and input transformation should be used like sort of something like what we have in resources, where you have this parse function for like, for example, validating via Zod or whatever you're using. So transform function is sort of something like that. You can change a bit of how the data is formatted, like we have this Boolean attribute and so on. But for other reasons, it probably shouldn't be using, and stick to computed or linked signal depending on what you have down the line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that seems to be the formal guidance. So it's a thing to know about, has some built-in ones, use it for good reason. So, and then also came out a little bit afterwards, content queries. So the old-fashioned view child, view children, content child, and so on. I didn't use them a whole lot until signals, actually, but I find them more interesting. Very recently, I had a very tightly coupled series of child components, and like the parent needed to know like overall state of validity of like each one. And like of all the options I did, I just put on an interface on those, and it said it'll have a valid signal. And then I just view childed all of those and just aggregated them into one Boolean. So that was really nice. So that's like a use case for, same old thing that you could have done with the decorator based ones, but they work very good with signals. Oh, the input transformation.
So what do you think?
That's interesting. I haven't used too much like of the stuff other than the built-in transformations, but I could see that with I'd have to think on that.
Don't input signals that aren't marked as required have a option to provide a default value. I'm not sure about it right now. For required, you cannot, because, well, it's required. But for usual ones, I don't kind of see the point. Or maybe I'm missing something.
I could see if it's like, I haven't done much with the router input binding, but I could see if you marked it as required, and then at runtime, the like the params in the router binding wasn't there. So I'm imagining
it throws an error. It throws an error.
It does.
But if it's a required input, you think that the value might be something like null, or maybe some other like default value by convention. So sometimes you have something that is not falsy, for example, like a string that says false or a string that says 0 or something, and you want to make a switch to another default. Maybe in those cases this could be useful. It would be probably better than to write like a computed specific to just like check on it.
Mm-hmm.
Could make sense.
And one thing I will mention at some point in this too, I love ngxtension. Some of this stuff feels so natural. We recently used some of their utilities for routing, for like query parameters or whatnot. Their system for fallbacks and stuff like that for them, especially if you have a whole bunch, is really nice. So I may touch on that a bit later, but that's what I'm more used to myself.
ngxtension is a really stand-up library. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely give it a try. There's lots of really useful stuff there.
Yeah. I'm definitely not going to be the last time I mention this here on this call, but yeah. On to like model ones. My prediction is I think that for reasons we'll mention in a bit, I think model inputs are going to pop off. Basically two-way binding for inputs. It implicitly, like whatever the name of the model is, like if it's thing, great name for an input, I'm sure. But if you have thing and then you have a change event, it'll make thing changed automatically that you can be using in the parent. And the nice thing about it is you can the child, if it makes sense, can write to that, and that will propagate up to the parent for some nice two-way binding.
It's a big upgrade compared to what we were forced to do previously with all the magic naming. I mean, still some part of the magic naming is still here because you can do, as the slide mentioned, like XYZ changed, but at least you don't do it like manually. You don't have to name your output in a specific name. You don't have to name your output anyway. You have just one function that creates a two-way binding for you. So this is really a big upgrade.
Mm-hmm. The interop, I know GIFs can be a little distracting when you share them, so I won't necessarily stick on this for too long, but this is the article that I was talking about that I wrote for Angular Space. And as you can see there in that GIF, normally before Angular 18, when they introduced this new form events API, you could really, as far as observable values go, only react to the status and value observables. Yeah. But in 18, and this is the hugest thing for forms until, in my opinion, like Signal forms are coming out. All these things.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah. And all these things like touched, pristine, valid, invalid, pending, dirty. And, some of those are also could have been status derived in the old days. But as well as you can react to, if you want, submitted and reset. But those don't have like default, like there isn't like a state for that. But those are also things you can do there. These and the RxJS interop were huge. And essentially in my like interop in that article, that combines all of those and gets their synchronous values to start with, and then watches that new API's streams to have these values live. And you just call allEventsSignal or allEventsObservable if you want that to get each respective event.
So I have to ask, to confess, I haven't read this article back then. But is it like a sort of a deep signal? So is it, or is it like a wrapper around all of the events that maps to the specific object that we could see?
Good question. It is, at least like back then, I didn't know about, there wasn't like deep signals, which,
well,
there will
still
be. Yeah. But there is, I know in ngrx signals, you can make a deep signal, and just as a utility, you don't even have to use it in a store. I have tinkered with that, like since I wrote this, and I believe like you could wrap it with that if you wanted to like reach deeply into the values. But the way I wrote it in the article, it's like you invoke it and then you get like the value and the status. So you just invoke it like at the top with all the other properties.
Yeah, I see. Well,
so,
it is very useful.
And in the stack blitz, I'll show, I have like a link to a slightly updated version of the code in reference to that article, but get to that. And then currently, the state of most Signal APIs are stable. Link Signal came in relatively recently as developer preview and now stable in 20. And I'm loving Link Signal. I didn't get the idea with it at first, but the more I use it, the more I'm like, this is great at what it does. All of the resources are still currently in experimental. And then in 20.2, really interestingly, there is now the router's current navigation is a signal. You used to be able to just get it synchronously. It's still there, but it's marked as deprecated. And I believe when you upgrade, it'll also manually update that. Nope. No high-five in the camera. And then, and as Matthew Riegler said on the Angular subreddit, r/Angular, quite active there, said that we are looking at some non-breaking quick wins for the router. So that was one of the first things that came to mind. And there is also coming up in 21, I believe I don't know if I listed in here, but it's in the Stack Blitz. There is another one that is coming for the router for signals too.
Oh, really? I've missed that.
Yeah, I'm a big repo watcher.
Yeah.
I've transformed like half of the time. I think it feels like most people these days, you just go on your phone when you don't know what to do. I've replaced like a quarter of that with just looking at the Angular repo. So I'm like looking at the PRs. I'm like, whoa, when is this coming?
Okay, well. That sounds more healthy than scrolling through YouTube Shorts, I guess.
Plenty of that still.
You get all the sorts of ads, like paid ads for AI applications that say, "Oh, I replaced the doom scrolling with micro learning or something," and turns out the solution is to just open and read like different GitHub repos. It would be way more useful.
Well, if you want more productive YouTube Shorts too, I mentioned this Stack Blitz, some creators who have shorts, not just
Nice.
the Angular's official channel. They've been going really heavy on making videos from like things that they've done before or shorts, but there's also some creators like Igor Sadov who makes great visuals and videos and stuff like that. And Igor puts out some shorts regularly. So, but I know exactly what you mean.
Somehow YouTube doesn't know that I'm actually doing Angular because I never get Angular content there. Sometimes I get Matt, the TypeScript guy, and other than that, it's usually like cooking videos because I like cooking, but no Angular content, like never.
Yeah, I have like a separate account just for like all my like Angular nerdy stuff than my general YouTube. But for me, all it took was like opening one, like, I don't know, something silly, like a Family Guy, like best moments compilation, like once on accident, just completely blew up like half my algorithm.
That's how it is. Especially, it becomes really terrible when you watch one short clip like to the end. If you skip it at some point, it might not be that, but if you watch one fully, man, you are in for a ride.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now I'm curious, what are we going to see next in Angular? What in relation to signals, like
Good
what
question.
is missing?
It's almost like you cheated and looked at my slides I sent you before.
You know what? Before I asked this question, I thought that actually I don't remember if the next slide is about. Yeah.
All good. I compared to the Stack Blitz that I'll show off too. This is not as fleshed out, so I did this pretty recently. But so in the future, only the Angular team knows this, so it's just a matter of like when for these kind of things like that. But at some point, we can expect resources to get out of experimental, maybe on the more traditional track to then developer preview, and then at some point stable. Maybe, I don't know, it could go directly to stable depending on things. They did have those two RFCs. One of the RFC was on just kind of like the whys and the general architecture of resources, and then the second one was more like more implementation, more user experience. And so I don't know if this is how they do it, but I could totally maybe see it going directly to stable, but who knows? More traditionally could be developer preview. And whenever that happens, I'm not sure. I think that in my observations, at least, I think a good chunk of stuff since they came out has happened in 19 and 20, as far as I understand. But who knows what other sort of things that they want to wrap up before graduating on to the next step.
I mean, if we talk about resources, I think the hottest question would be, is stabilizing resources in any way connected to like other endeavors in terms of, for example, mutation resources, if we ever get something like that, or resources are simply the state of things for, to say it plainly, like make get HTTP requests, and for everything else we'll figure out later. What do you think about that?
Good question. There seems to be, and I generally agree with it, I definitely, that's one of the most like common things I think I've seen. I don't know. It sounds like from what I've heard that I believe there, or at least it makes sense that there eventually be some sort of signals and mutations, and I would at least assume that it would be like resource adjacent or use like similar language to it, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they've said anything on. Still think that Matthew. Oh, yeah.
Could be the case. I mean, nothing to contradict that.
Yeah. So who knows? I don't think I've heard any much movement on that end, but I wouldn't be surprised personally. As far as my stance, I think it totally makes sense that the pattern as they established it now is most optimal for get or just retrieving stuff. But there definitely has to be some piece in some form, even if it's not tied to resources for some sort of mutations I expect down the line.
I have
Or not tied
seen,
to resources.
Yeah, I have seen a bit of a movement in the community, right? We saw several like community-based implementations of what could work for like mutation stuff. One of them was something like CRUD service, right? Or CRUD signal. So you get like all the operations on one sort of entity, right? A resource. So you get the get, you get the update, the delete, and so on. And it seemed very neat. It was very good implementation, but in terms of like the language that it uses, it's like too neat, too good to be true, in my opinion. Because you will always then at some point get this one HTTP endpoint that is so weird for some reason that you have to send something in a way that just doesn't make sense with this neat, crude thinking pattern, right? I just can't come up with an example from the top of my head, but and I have seen an implementation that essentially just had another type of resource, right? I think mutation resource. I think Marco from the ngrx team came up with that, and I really like that one because it's sort of, it didn't assume anything about like what's going on in the API layer. It just said, okay, you're doing a mutation, you can define it here, doesn't matter what it does, but the conventional operations like and the data that you need from there, like the is loading, is success or whatnot, all was there without making any assumptions about the API. And I kind of liked that. I would love to see something like that in Angular.
Yeah, and that's probably where Reiner is thinking, like, Michael, mention the RFC and the toolkit. Mention the RFC and the toolkit. There is a RFC in the ngrx-toolkit. It's one of the more recent issues. If you look at it, it's issue 212, and it is about. And I, if I remember correctly, it is based off of Marco's proposed one. Open this link.
Yeah.
Yep, link directly to that. So Manfred has been working really hard on that for saying once the resource API enters dev preview, the signal store will have first class support for it. Until then, and then just talks about like mutations and like the want for some resource like capabilities with that. And so Manfred has been fleshing out a like an RX, or not just RX, but like a with mutations thing in the toolkit for stuff like.
Maybe if you have it opened, you should bring that up on the screen now.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, I've been looking at this on my off screen. Cool. So yeah, and like you mentioned before, I'm a member on the toolkit. That's why I have all the fun buttons you don't normally get to see in every issue. Yeah, so the usage proposed here, and since this is proposed, we've had some back and forth and stuff like that, and discussion and hashing out some stuff in the PRs. But like here, you would see you have like the with mutations, you declare that. And then, so like in the signal store, for example, if people are not familiar with the signal store, it's like a functional store, and you can put in like something like a signal store feature. They're called like with mutations, and that from then on in the store will expose some methods that you have defined in your features. So in this case, you have like this like Rx mutation, and you just specify what you want the mutation to do. And with that would come something like is processing or like a mutation error, and some updaters. And then in the proposed Rx mutation, you could like subscribe to like a success or error callback. And then there's a proposed non-Rx one, just a mutation one. Yeah, it's just called mutation. And so it internally would use like a switch map or exhaust map type behavior. Sorry if I'm getting one of those details wrong, Reiner. You can blast me on that. But yeah, so roughly the idea: have a resource like mutations, and this is built off of like Marco's like prototype of stuff. And the idea to have all the sort of conveniences and stuff like this, but for mutations.
Yeah. This is really interesting. I haven't seen this before, but the idea, of course, of this mutation approach, as I mentioned, I saw on Marco's Twitter. It was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think I'm going to just read out this last comment. I think separating read resource from mutations is fine. Otherwise, a highly composable construct like signal store would be required to support several combinations of operations on an endpoint. Yeah, I think this is a great point. That's what I started with when I said about like the crude signal or crude resource or whatnot, because it in terms of like being a store, encapsulating a lot of logic and this all movement and friction about some piece of state. It's a bit of a big responsibility, and it's hard to call it a reactive primitive. It's not a primitive anymore. It's not a building block. It's like this big thing that says, okay, give me the data and everything works. It's a big responsibility, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it would be great to have like solutions similar to that in user land, right?
Yeah,
But maybe, yeah.
and that seems in line with what Lars Flens Rocker in chat said a little bit earlier about stabilizing the resource type. Make room for like custom resources, but like that's on a more community, or like that's more on an implementation on a code base or library base like thing, rather than have much more complex internals like built into something like that at like the ground, where there's a lot more going on with that if it were to be in one. So yeah, I see what you mean on that.
So should we talk about signal forms finally?
Yeah, real quick, one other thing I want to show, because you thought that was cool in the toolkit. Wrong page. The toolkit is also just recently launched with resource. And as we say here, it's very likely to land in NGRX once resource hits developer preview. So this with resource is early access to something like this. And you either just throw in a resource and it just comes with the value or status, or you can give it a name and it'll be user value, user status. And it's pretty straightforward. You can do resources now in current NGRX, but you got to like throw it in like a with props or something like that. I believe I could be wrong on that too. I haven't gotten to the latest version, but I know that's what people were at least doing at like 19. I believe in 20, you can put one in. Could be wrong. I'm not going to talk more on that because I haven't done a whole lot of it on 20 directly, but I did review this, and this is really slick. So I just wanted to point out the with resources feature in particular, with like the first class support of that in the toolkit. But yeah, forms, like you were saying, that's the really spicy thing I think people have been wondering about.
People have been killing each other over that GitHub. I think it's not a separate repo, right? It's part of the one of the sub packages in the Angular main repo. I don't even think it was supposed to become like publicly discussed, but it was out in the open, so people started looking at it before even there was any like announcement or whatever. We haven't gotten. Wait. Did we get an RFC on Signal Forms?
Not yet.
No, right? No, not yet.
I'm waiting for the day, but not yet.
Yeah.
So I have been like, I've definitely been one of those people that sniffed it out like pretty quick that they were publicly prototyping this. I believe as far back as like December or January, they at least publicly made the branch, and under prototype signal forms. And I'm not going to dig directly to the README because a lot of the stuff is said in the PR that we can go over. But they're like, hey, this is just a prototype here. We're throwing things at a wall. Like, we're trying stuff. None of this is like a guarantee. We're seeing what like works, what is like functional. And there will eventually be, once we think it's like ready enough, there will be an RFC and a more formal process. So they have been just, as they go, putting things on the prototype. And there's also on GitHub a projects board for the forms. But again, also like anything on there that's not a guarantee, but like that's an indicator of something that they've, they're like, okay, we need to check this out. Or some of the things that they have been, doing. If they do that, they'll sign off on that. So yeah, I think it's very nice that even though, it's been a while that's out there, it's been really helping me be like, oh, like there's a lot that goes into this. Like they are putting a lot of effort into this, and like it's taking time, and like they are finding things and having like DX, like, oh, validation, some inconsistencies we noticed and stuff like that. Or we still got to discuss and reduce some high-level design for this thing or that thing. So
I remember seeing this sort of grid for the zoneless story, right? A lot of discussions like this, both on the design and I think like the internal stuff, all in the public. It was interesting to read. Although I understood way fewer concepts from there, I guess, because zoneless is a big beast which we try not to touch today.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Although about signal forms, I'm gonna say something. Maybe we can frame it as a question, but it's more of a concern that I have. When I do interviews, like I like to ask candidates about their opinion on forms, like which one do you choose, when do you choose, like reactive or template driven. And what I see most often is that they will say, okay, I'm using template driven, for example. But when you kind of dig around, you see that they just picked it and stick with it. And of course, reactive forms usually are more popular. Most of the people will say, okay, the observables, I'm using reactive forms. But and it's a bit of a design thing. Like the framework gives you two ways of achieving the same result. And by the way, sometimes people assume that reactive forms are more powerful, but that's like not true. You can do literally the same stuff either with a template driven form or with a reactive form. And now we are getting a third type of form. So what's gonna be the landscape, right? In terms of both like educating. So now you have to teach. If you are teaching people Angular, if you are making courses, if you're writing content, now you have to account that there's this third type of forms. Isn't like a bit confusing? And do you think that the long-term strategy would be for the Angular team to just drop everything and keep the signal forms? Not now, not like next year, but at some point.
It's a good question. My reading of like the current state of like the forms and some of their stated goals that they're trying for is it seems like the best pieces from like the ideas of them and then some of the more practical pieces of like both of them, but also still its own thing. I know like what they've said here, that they want some interop with the old forms, particularly to be able to connect to like reactive forms. And this is still something that they're iterating on, especially now. But the way I last saw it and understood on the branch is you'd be able to pass in like your reactive form and then be able to access like things like the values and I believe like status and stuff like that. So like the existing landscape, it sounds like to me that it's important to have this interoperability with like reactive forms. And then as far as template driven forms, I don't use them as much, but the idea that I've gotten from them is this new signal forms, it sounds like it's prioritizing passing in writable signals, and the writable signal is the source of the value. That sounds like that would be closer to using template driven forms with signals like you are now. So I imagine that if you're using template driven forms now, you'll have a very natural path into using them. It sounds like you'll pass them into this form function, it sounds like. And if you have reactive forms, it sounds like there's still, there's still plenty that they're iterating on and trying, but it sounds like there's going to be some more like you formally pass this into this thing, and this makes you pass the reactive form into this signal form function, and you're able to use that stuff. So as far as like the three of them out there, it sounds like there's a very they're working on a very natural path to be able to be using them in these projects. And as for suggesting in the future, I imagine they're going to be like, signal forms are ready. We've worked really hard on them. If you want to interop with stuff, we've made this interop stuff, but probably should use signal forms. That's just what I'm assuming.
I mean, we should wait and see, obviously. But when you were describing what's the angle here, like you pass writable signals, the central part of it should be a writable signal. But that for me kind of creates a bit of like a few more questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be honest. I read the whole thing once and I saw the examples, but I don't remember them quite well. But I do remember the part where you kind of need to pass writable signals. And this brings me to some other questions because, for example, what is a big painful point for me in reactive forms? It's very hard to describe in terms of the tools that we have in reactive forms. Dependency of like one part of your form on another part, or maybe an external resource. If you have this, I don't know, you have an ngrx store, right? And you have a form. You shouldn't be storing your form in ngrx store because the store should be serializable and so on. And now you have the values coming from there. You should subscribe to the value and either initialize the form or maybe like set a new value. But also the guide says that you shouldn't, like, you should try to avoid subscribing to the ngrx store, right? But you kind of have to do that. And if you go forward and talk about like connection in the form itself, for example, I changed this one control, and for this specific value the other control must be disabled, enabled, whatever. That API is very painful, right? And you would think, okay, with signals it should be easier, and it is. But for example, if we talk about signal forms in terms of like writable signal, we should pass writable signals. What if I have an observable, right? What if I have an observable which I don't have any control over? For example, the ngrx stuff, if we take that example, it can go away because ngrx, even the conventional store, gives us like select signal, right? We can just plug the signal from there and do something. So if you have just an observable from some API and you need to depend on that API, right? Or your code is written on that way. Now, if you want to create a signal form, right, you should kind of convert it to a writable signal. So essentially, you should take your observable and turn it into a signal, right, with toSignal. And then you should take that signal, which is not writable because it's derived from observable, and make it into a linked signal. So it becomes a writable signal. And then you should pass it to the signal form. And I'm just interested. I think they have a good reason, obviously, to say that, okay, you just need to take the value and initialize the form. But what's the angle there? Like, why would we want? I mean, I understand that we want that specific case to be able to pass a writable signal, but why not pass just a value?
Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't thought too much on that. Reading some of the state of things, I shouldn't infer too deeply with like the prototype. I've seen some things that I think may address something like this, but it's been a while. Things may have changed. I shouldn't say too much on that front, but that's still definitely probably one of the bigger things to like watch out for, or ask them about. See when they have something more official to say on this. I agree. That's definitely something. It was probably one of like the first few questions I would have. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, right. It's so. Comment here says, Armen, what you described sounds like a resource. Yeah, it does. It does. And right, resources. Yeah, you know what? My bad. It wasn't as good of a question as I thought it would be. But still, if you haven't, still there's this multi-step thing, right? You have to take the observable, make it a resource, then pass it into signal form. Which kind of makes sense, but maybe there should be like some sort of a helper, or maybe I don't know, some method of initialization that takes into account. Although that won't work if we're trying to make RxJS optional. So no, I think it will stay that way. But good that we cleared that one out.
Yeah, and something I got asked this morning too was, what about is there going to be something equivalent like events, like the value like change that emits, in the way that you initialize like the form controls? And I'm not sure about that too, but that's also one of like the first things I'm wondering, RxJS or not, presumably no RxJS in that, like what do events look like that? Because events aren't very signally, but like they're still very important, for forms. So yeah, definitely like the state of like, how do you get things that are not signals into that being signally? Like they're still very important. What's that sort of like potential friction and stuff like that? What would be out of the box, more event driven kind of stuff? Definitely.
Yeah, you know what? I think we should read this comment out because it's interesting. Limitation of the current forms is validating a field based on another field. Correct. Using verbs. Wait. I think they mean the signal forms, right? Using verbs like required if, required unless, or required with is really cumbersome, and can only be done at the group level instead of the control level.
I was talking about this with Jay Anderson before this. I believe what Jay Anderson means is, I've talked too deeply about this, but I was doing something like this myself in reactive forms, where having a custom validator, or like having like a field that is just like more so like a helper on that. Like maybe I didn't get that take from you right. I should ask more about that, Jay Anderson. But it is, I have used like predicates like this, or I've had to make like comments, or I've had to make like helpers that are like, this subscribes to this value, and then we'll set this one is required and something like that. Yeah. You said in the chat, yeah, reactive form. So in whatever form this comes, like I've had helpers, or I've made observable streams that I just name, required with or one less. And this is something that I do know from seeing, again, with all these form things, the current state of the prototype that's bound for main soon.
Yeah.
The required function, it is easy to be able to cross-reference like fields. So this is something that if it continues, like it is in its current state, it seems very easy to have like required unless or required with, but very naturally in this like required function or like a validator like function, and you can like give back or set the validity.
Yeah, in some sense, those functions are also kind of like building blocks. Which I think I'm pretty sure we're gonna be able to write more complex validator functions that we can not only incorporate like the validation itself, we already can do that with reactive forms, but also like the logic of when and why it should be validated. So I guess that's an interesting direction. That's kind of like a new movement that will come with signal forms, a new way of writing validators that are more like environmental aware, right?
Yeah. And I'd say for people, if you want to see the current state of how that works, if you look in the PR and you want to understand how like the current state of it, the unit tests are a really great resource, like that they describe, in very plain English, like we want this to do that. And you can see different instances of how they are composing, like you said, with these building blocks for stuff like validation or disabled. And, these things could be like tweaked even before we get like an RFC or the first official public release of it. But I find reading the unit tests, even if you're not much of a unit test person or reader, are very like good way to get a very tangible idea of what this is like.
Okay, I feel if we stick too long on signal forms, we can talk about next morning, right?
Yeah.
So, I think any other questions on signal forms are welcome. Please make sure to post your questions. We will circle back.
Can I go over this like real quick?
Yeah, of course.
So this I know we're getting pretty close, so this will just be mostly something to reference after the fact. But I've also have an accompanying StackBlitz to the slides with even more examples, links to documentation, where you can go panel by panel on it's a little smaller on different generations of forms and examples. Like you can see like things computing, the interop, child forms, and like model inputs. The later generation link signals, and I annotate like half in like the code comments of the HTML, half in the code comments of the TS, like resetting pattern. Like for example, if you are ordering something and you're like, I want 3 phones, and then you change it to a laptop, it's like defaulted back to 1. Stuff like that. These are all different types of resources, RX resource, HTTP one. I pulled in the current state of the util for my form thing, talked about some routing. You can see links to the roadmap and Angular can I use. I put some stuff from your article and your takes that I definitely agree with in here. I mentioned some migrations for like signal inputs and queries that you can do as a schematic or like in VS Code field by field. Link to the Q&A on signal forms, the most recent stuff that's been said in like the PRs about their intent. And then some libraries using signals. And then lastly, some of my favorite resources like the Angular streams, r/Angular, Igor I mentioned, and some other people that are very helpful.
Man, can everyone, including me and everyone on the stream, please pause for a moment and appreciate what Michael has done here? Because when I think a couple of weeks ago, I texted him asking him if he would like to appear on our first live stream. My general message was, let's come have a chat about the future of Angular. And he now came up with all of this stuff. So definitely please check it out. We will post the links everywhere. And give Michael a follow everywhere you can, because you will keep learning about Angular at a way higher rate than you did previously.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm most active on like my Reddit on r/Angular. You'll see me, Michael, small dev. I got the same thing, but I'm also on like Twitter. I try to be more active on Blue Sky. I don't check my LinkedIn too much, but I engage with that on this kind of
Me
stuff.
neither.
Yeah.
So what do we have next? What do we have next? I think there are still a bunch of unexplored things.
Probably it sounds like I'd assume with some of this velocity that they may be putting some more stuff in routing. Like I said, I feel like ngxtension I feel like all the routing stuff in ngxtension, it just feels so natural. It feels like, I forget it's not like built into Angular. So I would check those out. Oh, and I do have a link somewhere in this on a thing that I had made previously about using examples of all of the ngxtension stuff. So I think that's for routing stuff. Though we have some stuff already, I could see more. Like you mentioned, potential for mutation APIs.
Yeah.
And probably a few other things that I don't know. What do you think?
I think for me the question is more like we already covered the stuff that we know is in the works and discussions and so on. I have, I mean, that's great. I have just a bit of, and maybe this is a more general question to everyone. Folks in the comments can come with all sorts of suggestions here. What's missing, right? Like we know all of the things that we discuss, usually they come from the RxJS place. Okay, routing used to use RxJS, now it has to have use signals, HTTP client, now we have resources. It's all understandable, but in terms of like other building blocks that are purely signal based, okay, is there anything that is missing? I think one thing is, for me, that it's a bit weird. I discovered it one time, and I think it would be great to have something that would cover such a case, is when you have like interdependent signals. Very hard to express that in the Angular signal graph that we have right now. What I was doing at one moment, I opened my banking mobile app, and I wanted to exchange some of our local Armenian currency. I want to change Armenian drams into dollars, right? And I realized that on the UI you have two inputs, and one says like dram and the other says dollars, and you input a value in the one of them, and the other one is automatically updated. But both of them are inputs, so you can write like 1,000 drams here, and it will show something in the other input. Then you go edit the other one, and the first one changes. Okay, so there's the kind of interdependent values. And I thought, okay, this is an interesting UI. I want to try to recreate it with like linked signal and whatnot. Linked signal was just out at that moment. I wanted to come up with interesting example, and you know what? I couldn't create something that would actually, because you have two immutable signals, right? Changing one should change the other, but you cannot simply write I think the only solution there which I came up with was to have two effects in which they both do the same thing but in reverse, and the other signal is untracked, so you don't get in a loop, right?
Yeah.
But I think that it's sort of a use case, like imagine converting temperatures or whatever. Imagine that is like a use case that maybe could be covered by a reactive primitive.
It's interesting you say converting temperatures. Are you thinking of one of those, not deep signals, but like the other internal typing? It sounded that's an example that Alex used in like a unit test for one of the more internal types.
Oh, okay.
For and I don't know if it's exactly like you're thinking with that, but I see what you mean, like interdependent ones, and like something like these ones that I've touched on, like the deep signal or whatever it's named now, are internal things. But I believe Alex mentioned something to some effect in the Q&A that like, who knows, like, you know, what is or what could be the next like primitive or something like that would be able to do something like this. And I know I didn't look into it too deeply, but there was a more recent discussion, I believe, in a thread on converting from Knockout.js to Angular and using signals. I believe it sounds like that's my reading of that is it may be very well relevant or adjacent to this idea of yours, and people were workshopping that, and someone who makes some Angular primitives for a library was talking in there. If I understand that correctly, maybe that would do something like that. But who knows, like natively in the framework.
And maybe another more general point from me, like what about browser APIs? I mean, I am maybe in the minority here, but I like browser APIs, different browser APIs. Some of them are great, some of them not so much, but all of them are useful. And you have this a lot of stuff right now, like intersection observers, mutation observers, I don't know, and they're called observers, not observables, right? And should we have some mechanisms to maybe bring some browser APIs into the Signal world wherever it makes sense? Because I've been writing functions that convert some browser APIs from promises or maybe even from callbacks to observables, right? And we have this clear breach between observables and signals now. So maybe there should be some connection there.
In the CDK, there is one for the breakpoint observing, and in ngxtension there is an intersection one to signals. So the CDK one is observables. I'm sure you could signal it, and then the intersection one, I believe that is an ngxtension thing. So I know you've been working on some, but I know someone in ngxtension has hashed out a signal intersection one.
Okay.
But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, more native support for like stuff like that. Like how could you have first class support for stuff like that, like browser APIs with signals?
Sorry, I was meant to show another comment, but another one popped out, so let's look at both of them. Armen, throw that challenge on X. Love to have a step at that scenario. Sure, I will post tomorrow, not today because it's already 10 p.m. here. Please have mercy on me. But I will post it tomorrow. Let's see what solution people come up with to try to fix that sort of UI. That's a good idea. The effect to update the other has not only to depend on the value, but also the state like local. That's what I would try for. Oh, actually, I thought about it in terms of, okay, let's have, what's it called? Like a single source of truth, right? So which one should it be? And it got me down into a path that was actually, I was thinking, okay, maybe I should keep everything in dollars, continuing the same example, right? And then I was thinking, okay, if I have this in dollars, then this other one should be, well, it should be a linked signal, right? But when I update it, I should write an effect that, maybe something like that. I get that. But in terms of, although maybe this is just some sort of iteration of the diamond problem, I guess.
Yeah. That's one of the, I know what you mean. I can't explain the diamond problem myself, but like I know what you mean on that.
Well, which one comes the first? Maybe the diamond problem is the iteration of the egg and chicken problem. I don't know. And
chicken and
which
egg.
Which came first, the egg, chicken, or the diamond problem?
Yeah. Nice. That's the most Angular kind of way to.
Maybe even an additional computed could do. We shouldn't use computed. Both of them should be like, or maybe I'm missing something here.
I'm gonna drop a link to this recording in that thread that I believe was adjacent to something like this. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if A depends on B and B on A, you should expect something to C. Makes sense.
Yeah.
But the thing, although but the problem keeps coming to, even if if we extract something to C, right? And now both of them depend on C. But if you update A, you now have this C as an intermediary, right? You don't want to update B when you update A. You want to update C so it updates B. So why have it at all? In the end, you will have like n values that are interdependent, and you want the update to one of them to update all of them. So you just can maybe check this one and take arbitrarily one of them as the main value and just make the other ones circle back. But my point being, it would be great to have something to just handle that.
Yeah, and I think you have definitely made a few people in chat who are going to be thinking about this all night, and like,
nice.
How would I do this? Oh
no, let's have some cool community solutions.
Yeah.
You just chose a single source of truth and update the other based on that one. So even if the second one changes, you should calculate and set the first one. Yeah, that's what I agree. I mean, it's a correct way of thinking, but in terms of the code that we write to implement it, that's sort of exactly what we try to avoid. Let me reframe the problem. I want to do it without writing an effect, right? For example, we have the linked signal. The only reason we have linked signal, we don't need to have a linked signal. Actually, we don't need to have anything. We can just have signals and effects. Those are the basic building blocks. You don't even need computed. You can make computed signals by using effects. It's not that great, obviously, but you can do that. So, for example, linked signal entirely exists only to avoid writing effects. At the end of the day, it's a nice way to express some common task, right, that you are doing with signals. So maybe we should just understand whether this problem is, common enough to come up with a primitive. Without effect challenge, except you cannot do it without effect right now. I don't believe you can. I mean, if you can, we will make you the next host.
Yeah, and there's also another Angular Space article on that. Like, you could just use an effect, but when link signals came out, Reiner Hanekamp had an Angular Space article. I don't remember the exact one, but talks exact same thing you said. You could just have writable signals and effects, but that's not as optimal. You have these conveniences to have a better developer experience and like mental model. So yeah, I see what you mean.
Okay. So it's been a really great chat.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
I mean, our show is gonna be interesting, but it's even more interesting than I expected. There's lots of stuff I missed out. Like recently, I'm too bogged down with, like AI stuff. We're doing a bunch of stuff here with the Gemini API. I post sometimes on Twitter about that, and I I didn't forget Angular, but I missed out on maybe the latest stuff. So it was a big catch up for me too. Thank you very much for that. And please, I want to give you the stage for a bit to promote yourself, because you are doing a really great job, and I kind of feel you are a bit underappreciated, especially on Twitter, because you are so helpful, man, and everything you do was super helpful to the community. So if you have anything like your recent articles, the recent stuff you do, we will all post that in the description.
Yeah, thank you. I think I got a lot into this because of the people that I follow and stuff like that, and who put out the current things. And when you have more time to do Angular stuff, like I followed a model sort of like yours. Like, you see something interesting, you learn something interesting, you put an example out there. That's been my kind of like stance on social media. So on whatever platform I am, Michael Small Dev, Reddit, Twitter, Blue Sky, more active on Reddit and Blue Sky. I just try to meet people in the middle on things. I don't make too much like, oh, I'm going to write this thing, or I'm going to write that thing. Just when people have like questions or something like that, I just try to meet them in the middle with like my experiences, and maybe make something like a stack blitz or whatever. So yeah, I don't have too much formal stuff. Like I said, I recently am now like formally, on the ngrx-toolkit team, and we're working on some stuff that's like really exciting. Like I said, we just got that with resource out, so that's the most thing. But yeah, I'm just kind of ambiently always there, just absorbing things, and I like to share that with people. So if If you follow me on any of my socials, I'm probably posting about things that I saw in the repo or other things, or reposting stuff like Armen or other people. So, oh, my thank you for asking, is Michael Small Dev. So MICHAEL Dev.
We will post it all into the descriptions. So please, if you are watching on YouTube, we'll post there in the description. And if you are on Twitter or LinkedIn, we will make a final post on the live stream with all the links. Yeah, you won't miss out. I don't think I have much to promote. If you know me, I wrote a book, and in that book I talk about RxJS, interop, and signals too. Not that much in depth as we did today, in terms of there's a lot of stuff that came out after the book was published, which was in January, but it feels like it's been an eternity after that because so much have changed. But if you're just getting started, if you're thinking about, switching to signals, or maybe you think you missed out something, please check out my book. There's a lot of good examples there, I believe. Or alternatively, maybe easier, check out my article from today. Interestingly, we have maybe a question. Oh, wow, this is a big question. Let's see. Hello, I have ngrx-immer patch from library ngrx-immer. Wait, I've been using ngrx-immer, I think, for a long while, and ngrx-immer patch. Is that for the signal store, right? And architect's toolkit for connect Redux DevTools. Okay, how can I use immer patch state with custom name event in Redux DevTools without using custom update state from toolkit architects? Wow, this is the big question. I don't know, to be honest, because to be quite frank, I haven't used Signal Store in like production apps, so I haven't gone that deep. I've played with it around. I did like a pet project to see all the stuff, but I didn't go as far as to bring ngrx-immer stuff for Signal Store. But I think I understand the question in terms of this is something that could be bothering people on the DevTools level. Maybe they don't see where the patch is coming from.
Yeah, there's a couple things in like the toolkit, and some open issues with a few things with like the dev tools. That's also a great thing in the toolkit. You don't need to be using Redux to use to see signals in the Redux. The Redux extension, like people were so used to with Redux based like ngrx. You can use the toolkits with DevTools feature in your Signal Store. No Redux required, even though they recently added Redux to the Signal Store optionally. But yeah, as far as like this interaction with the toolkits and Immer stuff, I've seen a lot of this stuff talked before in some issues. I'm not with the intersection of all this stuff, not as familiar with stuff. This would be a good thing if there isn't already a discussion on this kind of stuff to maybe make a discussion in the repo or potentially an issue.
Nice.
Yeah, and thank you, Lars.
Okay, this was great. Took way longer than I expected. It was really an interesting discussion. And thanks everyone for the questions and comments. Hopefully we tried to answer them to the best of our abilities. Especially Michael did a great job today.
Thank you.
So for the next one, we actually have a guest for the next one. I'm not gonna say who, but you maybe got a bit of hints today, and I'll post about it a bit later, date and time for the next one, and of course the guest and the topic. But it's gonna be a very, very modern topic again. Okay, I like modern Angular.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks everyone. We're probably gonna wrap up.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Have a good day and see you on the next one.